if you could describe kind of what is your ultimate mission in life, the mission for which failure is not an option. And that is a tough issue, but if we could look at what is your real purpose for living? Why do you think you were born? What is the purpose, the why that you were here based on your understanding of life and what you could do for this world? Let's go to the end of your life, and what do you want carved on that tombstone that literally reflects the most important things that you want to be remembered for, the legacy that you would like to leave behind at the highest level?
I feel like it's good to give a little bit of context to the listeners. Tell us a little bit about how you guys came together to put this book together, because you come from similar backgrounds, but an absolute knowledge base to share with everybody. And this is a science-based approach, something that I think everybody can use every single day. What drew you together to put this project out there to the world?
Jim, go ahead.
So, Sheila and I both serve on a board. I was a co-founder of the Human Performance Institute in Lake Nona, just outside of Orlando. And we had an audience of some 400,000 people go through the program, but it was basically directed toward world-class athletes, professional chess champions, sumo wrestlers from Japan. We had an unbelievable operation, special forces from the military, medical, surgeons, where performance and, kind of psychology intersected, but we also brought in exercise physiology and nutrition. And we had quite a run. We sold the company to Johnson & Johnson. And Sheila and I serve on a board where we're trying to apply all of the lessons we've learned in sport in the world of high performance in general to youth. And it's called the Youth Performance Institute. And we were commissioned by that board to prepare a book, first of all, that would be for parents, teachers, and coaches, that then could be translated into very practical applications for young people, because we both came to the conclusion that decision-making is probably the single most important competency that we possess in life to navigate through life and to have a great life. We make some 35,000 decisions a day, 245,000 every week, and about 12 million a year. And when you ask people, what are you using to really make those decisions? Most people are very foggy. Parents don't teach at school, or they don't learn it in school. They don't learn it in grade school, junior high, high school, even in college, and even in graduate school. So Sheila and I decided we were going to do a science-based deep dive into what do we really know about decision-making, and can we help particularly kids, starting with adults, can we help young people make better choices in life? Because that is probably the single most important component to their life.
Yeah, and Dr. Sheila, I would imagine you know better than anybody. I know you have 3 boys. I have 2 sons. And so when we're talking about this, it starts with the parents, right? Like, if the parents are the ones reading this and passing this on, we often pass our greatest strengths and some of our biggest blind spots on to our children, especially when it comes to decision-making.
Right.
Talk to me about how personal this project was for you and how the impact really can make a difference on future generations.
Well, it was a deeply personal project on multiple levels, including the children. But there's this wonderful quote: "Don't worry that children aren't listening to you. Worry that they're always watching you." And so children pick up behavior by the way the adults in their lives model them. And obviously, their parents are first and foremost on the front line in everyday life, in the kitchen, having eating meals, in all the various elements that go along with raising children. And so the way that we deal with stress and deal with decisions and things as they come up on the fly, that maybe, especially the frustrating things, especially the hard things, the easy ones are easy, but when we're under stress, under pressure, watching us make decisions in a concerted way, making time to make sure we act rather than react, can be incredibly powerful. And during these years, these early years in development, childhood and adolescence are called sensitive periods in development, where the brain and body are stickier for forming long-term memories and habits that last across life. They just sort of embed in under the radar, just like brushing our teeth. They become automatic habit. And these years are the most powerful to really model the kind of behavior and thought patterns and behavioral patterns for our children that we want them to have as the, you know, assets to last them across life. So, so for me and our boys are now a bit older, you know, they're 16, 18 and 20. And it's, you know, it's as a behavioral geneticist mom to watch, you know, nurture, shape nature. They all are similar in some ways and different in some ways. And this temperament, you know, their temperament, their dispositions are similar to the way they were when they were babies. But to see, you know, habits and mindsets be shaped across time has been incredibly powerful. And we as parents and all the adults in the lives of children, whether teachers or coaches or grandparents, have incredible power to, through the relationship, through the conduit of the relationship, to really shape how young people make decisions, how they think about the world around them, and to give them this decision-making capacities, which, as Jim said, is an incredible superpower, you know, given that that's the GPS with which we navigate through life.
Yeah, it's it's so powerful. I often think, as I've grown up, there's a story that always comes back to me in my family of watching how your kids are watching you. And an example is I used to throw my shoes in a particular spot that my wife would constantly tell me, please stop putting your shoes here. And all of a sudden I would see those shoes next to mine would be my boys, and my sons are 17 and 14.
Yeah.
And there's two real big things that came to me. It was first the realization that they were mimicking and mirroring the exact thing. But then it was how quickly time passes and watching their shoes get bigger and bigger. And I would literally be walking out the door and I'd look down and I would say, you know, I'd feel my eyes well up a little bit. I would have a very emotional moment and I would say, gosh, it's passing so fast. And now my oldest son, 17, wears a size 12. His shoes are in my spot every time. They are bigger than my shoes. And I'm very proud.
You haven't moved your shoes yet?
No, I still don't move.
In the same spot.
Adrian actually listens to this podcast. I am so blessed that she listens, so she'll be proud that I mentioned her name. But she listens to this podcast and always gives me great insight. And the truth is that she eventually gave in and put a little nook there and actually added a bench so we could just put our shoes directly on the bench in the spot that was not the correct spot for the shoes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it's a wonderful metaphor for parenting and for life.
yeah, well, it's a self-awareness that you guys talk about, because really, I want to get into Yoda because I think the science-backed benefits of the book and the things you talk about in Wise Decisions is really valuable. But I feel like self-awareness is such a key component. And when I look back and I see myself just noticing that this was something that was happening, it's like the first trigger that says, that's not all they're watching, Scott. We have to be the better version of ourselves. We have to display better information, and we're imperfect. We're completely imperfect. We do the best that we can. But I think self-awareness is a really good place to start if you guys are okay with that. And either one of you that wants to jump in, this is my first podcast with two people. So I will do my very best to make sure that we never talk over each other, but I'm extremely excited to have both of your opinions shared here.
Well, I'd love to jump in if I can.
Yeah.
On this one. So, and I want to go to the example of the Nook. I mean, that's just such a brilliant example of taking a step back. And, you know, as we know, when we want something to happen, I want your shoes to be in place A, but they're in place B all the time. You know, it's frustrating, and these emotions can build up, and it can turn into this kind of automatic reactivity response of, you know, why are your shoes not there? This real emotional response. So taking a step back and being aware of, you know, again, it's about acting rather than reacting, and being aware of one's emotional state, and not just taking that and jumping right in, and taking a step back to think about a solution, because it is really in the context of positive emotion, the real learning, the sticky learning happens. It feels good, where it becomes a part of our, nurture shaping nature, our epigenetic, our learning, our neuroplasticity, the things that we do going on into the future. Negative reinforcement, that can work over a short period of time, particularly with children and adults, and I think with all humans. We want to get along. We want there to be positive emotion, positive energy, and balance. And so when we can be aware of our emotions, and the underlying mood state, and that requires taking a step back and using tools like breath, just recognizing that's frustrating. Let's think about a solution. Or with the child, thinking about how we can frame up a situation that they can understand, in a way that will help them change behavior without, kind of being nagging or frustrating or kind of feeling like we're jumping down their throat. So that self-awareness piece, it all starts with self-awareness. And this is where Yoda comes in. So, and Jim, I'll tee it up for Jim to introduce Yoda.
So thank you, Sheila. So, I've spent so many years working with high-profile people in very mission-critical situations. And it was quite obvious that the most important coach you'll ever have is the one no one else hears but you. And that is your own private voice. We all have a public voice, which is what Sheila and I and Scott are speaking with today. But there's also another voice, and they don't always align. We don't always say what our private voice is actually articulating. But the real you is really your private voice. And that's the one that's closest to what we call the command center of your brain. We spend a lot of time trying to understand where neurologically are decisions made, and when are we actually accessing the complete intelligence, all the assets in the human brain that actually contribute to great decision making. And that means we have to educate that private voice. And that private voice, we came to understand, is your own decision advisor. And we all have them. And that spells Yoda. Yoda. And it's not the Yoda of Star Wars. There are some similarities. But this is your repository of wisdom, of intelligence. And what parents are contributing to with their public voice is your inner voice. And we came to understand that the way people speak to you as a child eventually morphs into how you speak to yourself. So if people around you speak to you with wisdom and kindness and perspective and help you understand what's on the line here with every decision, your Yoda begins to take that in. Those neurological inputs form this narrative inside your head that becomes the most important navigational voice you will probably ever have. Not unlike Siri in your car when you're trying to get from destination A to B, constantly giving you, and you're hoping that you can trust Siri to get you to where you want to go. But our whole book, which I think is maybe the most important book I have ever written, and it was a joy to join forces with Sheila because she's an extraordinary scientist and critical thinker, was, to step in. I'm quite surprised that I didn't get to this sooner in my career, because it really is the single most important thing we can do for our own lives, and most importantly for the lives of our children. So Yoda lives in us, and it either is a great source of counsel and wisdom, and we can trust it, or it may be terribly dysfunctional because it reflects, it almost looks like it's coded in the genes, because our voice becomes the voice of our parents, and their voice is the voice of their parent. And they believe somehow that you have to be tough, and we're not necessarily against toughness, but saying to someone, you're never going to make anything of yourself. You're a bloody loser. Why do you keep coming up short all the time? If I had the opportunities you had, I would have been a superstar, on and on and on. And you think that's going to motivate them. What it does is it's embedded in this voice that they use to coach themselves, and they will use that to coach their children. And it literally is a massive barrier for most. And it just is a simple waste of energy that it takes you nowhere. So we were very excited to kind of do a deep dive into this space. And I think there's so much there for anyone who wants seriously to learn about decision making in a practical way.
What I love about this analogy and Yoda just in general is there's two things. Number one, in order to identify what's so important to us, we have to go inward. We have to really listen to how we talk to ourselves, what we say, where does it come from? You know, I always say my dad was a first generation father. And what I mean by that is his father wasn't the best example growing up. So a lot of the opportunities I received did come from a place where it was, I didn't have this opportunity. You don't understand what you have, you know? And so there's a gratefulness I have inside of me that when I tapped into it and flipped it from me thinking that I was performing for my father to me performing for myself and being grateful for that experience and that input, it was such a turning point. And so that's the first thing I love about Yoda. The second thing I love about Yoda is I read your book, which was amazing. And I did not go through the activities yet, but I will, because they're really, really good and they're a great deep dive. But I love the analogy of just Yoda being this outside, stepping outside of yourself. I feel like we often, to Dr. Sheila's point, we're often in a moment where we can feel ourselves slipping away. The version of ourselves we want to be, the version of ourselves we're acting out as in that moment. And there's this Yoda, if we use the Star Wars analogy, you know, this wisdom, this separate entity out there that if we just tap into it, you can almost step outside, look at yourself doing it and change and adjust. But it takes practice and focus. And that's what you are specializing in teaching.
Well, the science story is really incredibly optimistic. I mean, it gives us, we have agency to shape our behavior, to train our Yoda, to nurture our nature in a way that embeds as automatic behavior over time. It requires that piece around self-awareness. And I love the story you told about your first generation father and flipping your narrative internally around, your why, and what, why you're the why on the performance. Well, we can do things for ourselves and are motivated by, the right things, our own true north inside. It changes everything. And again, nurture shapes nature across life through the mechanism of epigenetics. This is happening 24/7, 365. And we are the authors of our own stories. And I think, it's critical to remember that as adults in particular, and help our children understand that they too are the authors of their own stories. And one of the most incredible things that we can embed in them is this ability to flip a narrative, to take an event that happened and change the script, to formulate, you can call it growth mindset. There are different terms for it, but there's always something to be learned out of every situation. And when we can just embed it as automatic habit to go in and make up the story, basically formulate the story by finding the silver lining, the growth opportunity, kind of that leading edge, to strengthen ourselves. That is, again, a superpower that is going to transport us and our children through life. And as Jim said, these are multi-generational patterns through both the genetic side of things, the biologic side of things, but also the behavioral side of things, because it's this iterative, interactive process across life.
So it's such a fun thing to go through and to think about. Even as parents, a lot of times on this show, I talk about the high performance life, and I define life as love, the who's that are most important in our life, impact, it's what we do every day, faith, which is something bigger than ourselves, and energy, how we show up, healthy mind, body, spirit. And I've used these 4 quadrants in my life to deal with overwhelm and any type of anxiousness or major decision making and prioritization. And I just brain dump and utilize the categories to identify what's most important. But when you look at your book and your research, it was so uplifting to read, because there were so many parts where I was like, oh, here's where we get into the mind, body, spirit. How are we showing up every day? How is the energy that we're showing up with? Is it our best? Is it the worst? Are we completely drained from decision fatigue? All these things are in this book, and it's science-based, that sometimes just make you feel good about the things that you're already doing. So not everything we're doing is bad, everybody out there listening. There's so many great things that you're doing. It's really, how do you fine tune them to be special?
Well, here's
Yeah,
the thing. Oh, sorry. Can I just, one little quickie thing that kind of fits in with what I was talking about beforehand and related to what you were just saying. Mental and physical health are two sides of the same coin. The mind-body thing, the same molecules that affect mental health affect physical health. So again, to this mindset element and flipping the narrative, we are shaping our biochemistry when we're learning how to create adaptive resilience building mindsets and stories and narratives. That is also physically, literally changing our biochemistry. That changes our physical health and everything else that stems from that. So sorry, Jim, I just wanted to pop that in.
That was great.
it's great. It's so interesting. The more you really look at this amazing human system that we have, you marvel at it. You have to say, my goodness, there's so many sources of wisdom that we can draw from. And part of this is to help people understand that our best decisions are usually not, just a quick reflexive response, that there is wisdom in our ability to analyze, to bring forth facts, look at things reality-based, just to really look at what are the critical elements here and what does my logical mind say here about this decision. That's one source of input. But if that's it, you may make some terrible choices. Then there is wisdom of the heart. The heart is an incredible source of wisdom in terms of, empathy, kindness, all these emotions that touch you deeply and give you a sense of value in terms of this decision you're about to make. And our heart should be vetted deeply, just like our ability to be analytical and a critical thinker. And then we have emotions. Emotions are powerful sources of input in the wisdom category, whether they're negative emotions or positive emotions. They all have value, and they tell us there's thousands of years of evolution that have honed our ability to feel, to have emotions, and those emotions bubble up in the way of particular feelings. And if we can access those feelings and bring them into the decision-making process, we're likely to make better decisions. And then we have this intuition. There's a wisdom there as well. It's like our gut. What does our gut say? And so the book is kind of laying out a kind of a formula. When you have a moment to pause between that stimulus and response, maybe you ought to check in. Yoda can work best if it has multi-dimensional access to really important information. And then make your decision, and then you hold yourself accountable for the decision. There is the vetting process, which is separate from actually having the courage to act out what you have decided is the right thing to do. And then the third step is really to hold yourself accountable. You made this in the best situation that you could. You did your best job, and you learned from it, no matter if it was a good decision or a bad one. But that's the story of life. We want every decision to be some form of learning about your next decision. And rather than the 12 million decisions that you make every year, you're deciding which of these you're going to habituate and make really unconscious, because you've already looked at that. And what are the decisions you want to make very deliberately and consciously so that you don't get it wrong, if at all possible?
One alley-oop on that is, Jim alluded to it, you know, with our children, especially, you know, owning our, if we make a bad decision, you know, we're not perfect, we mess up, but we can learn from it. So making sure that we talk and we're just open about, you know, why did I make that decision? What would I have done differently this time? Demystify the whole thing. And always, when we can do this in the context of love and, you know, compassion and that positive energy, this is really where the rubber is going to hit the road in terms of stickiness, in terms of them remembering it. On the inside, there's another wonderful quote that I love: kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You know, I think this is, again, applies to all humans. It's nicer when there's kindness on the other side of the ledger. But on the language of emotions, and, you know, our emotions live in our viscera, our organ systems on the inside of us, and our feelings are the outward expression of our emotions. Our emotions are the first real forms of communication and understanding that we lay down as human beings. In utero and early childhood, we don't have language yet. When we're babies and toddlers, we start to develop language. But our emotions are the only way we have to express ourselves. And so everything, because of the way we're wired from the get-go, you know, presents on the outside through the filter or the lens of our emotions. And so understanding what those elements are, and really just, you know, the stimulus and response, as Jim said, the wonderful Viktor Frankl quote, that pause is really what is going to give us the capacity to be able to step outside and take a look at a situation and make a decision with intentionality and act rather than react.
Yeah, I think I love that, and it's beautiful. And as you said the alley-oop, and you literally went right to exactly where I was thinking, and that is the imperfection of life, the imperfection of parenting, the imbalance of life, and the self-awareness that comes with that, but the accountability that Dr. Jim was talking about, which is so important. I feel like parents, a lot of times, I'll just speak from experience, I'm highly intense, right? And my give a darn factor is really, really high on everything. So, you know, if my wife's listening to this, she's going to be shaking her head. Yes, it's ridiculous. Like, where are we going to dinner? Scott, it's not the last place you're going to eat dinner, but hey, did you look at the wine list? What's the menu look like? You know, I'm intense, and I love that part, but that turned up too loud is a disadvantage. What I learned about myself is I tend to be a sprinter. And I share stories about myself so the audience can understand their own imperfections, right? And if I start every day of my life sprinting, a sprinter can only sprint so far before they're exhausted. And then they're showing up to their family, to their friends, to the relationships. They're drained, they're energy deficient at that point in time. So I've learned in my older age to start slow, to make less decisions, especially early. I think I bring myself to a certain point and then I sprint, and then I'm the best version of that. I got a question right as I walked out the door today, and I was like, Adrian, I can't answer that right now. I will give you a very poor answer. And I said, but tonight I swear we'll talk about it. And we left. And I bring that up because we make mistakes as parents, but learning about ourselves is crucial. Then owning those mistakes, I imagine, is even more important. So if you guys could speak to that just a little bit, and I use myself as the guinea pig because I think the listeners can understand that imperfection pretty easily.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Jim.
So Scott, what you were doing in the conversation you were just having and describing what was going on, you're really kind of honing in on who you want to be. And you're trying to bring out the kind of person that ultimately is the one that, if you could show up in life, this is how you want to register who you were while you were here. And so one of the things that we felt was really critical, and the book does this, I think, in quite a bit of detail. What do you want to preload your Yoda with? What is it that really will help you become more of the best that you can be and represent the highest level of connection to your wife, to your children. Who is it you really want to be? Because every decision you make is going to impact that in some way. So one of the things is to have you describe who you are when you are absolutely most proud of yourself, when you are the best version of yourself you could possibly be. Let's load that in to your Yoda. Also, if you could describe kind of what is your ultimate mission in life, the mission for which failure is not an option. And that is a tough issue, but let's load that into your Yoda. Let's, if we could look at what is your real purpose for living? Why do you think you were born? What is it that will make you feel that you actually earned in some way this lottery of life, that you have a life? In what sense do you think you might have earned the right to be here? What is the purpose, the why that you were here based on your understanding of life and what you could do for this world? Let's load that in. And so we have a whole series of lenses. And maybe the most important is what I would call, and Sheila calls, the tombstone perspective, where we call this getting home. And even if you had a rough home, getting home simply means you end up at the end of your life where you want to end up. And so we have people go, to me, it's the most powerful thing. I've worked with thousands and thousands of people with exercises and collected data, and then try to determine the impact of that exercise. This is by far the most powerful exercise I've ever had with all the people that I've had the fortune to work with. And it's simply taking them to the end of their life. You don't normally get a chance to determine what's going to be carved on your tombstone. Someone else does that. Let's go ahead, as Stephen Covey said, and he's absolutely right, start with the end in mind. Let's go to the end of your life, and what do you want carved on that tombstone that literally reflects the most important things that you want to be remembered for, the legacy that you would like to leave behind at the highest level? It might be 6 words or 2 sentences. And those have to be earned. Those are not given. They're not normal. And those, if you want to be an extraordinary mother or father, kindness, integrity, honesty, it's almost always a connection to someone else. Then let's work backwards. And then every day, the decisions you make are vetted through that lens. Is this going to help me end up at the end of my life that I actually represented what those 6 words really were in a dynamic, reality-based way? And if you vet things really very, very carefully in those decisions that really matter in a big way, those lenses will help you navigate. And so we call that getting home. Getting home is to be the person you wanted to be when you look back at the end of your life. This is the best I could present for this wonderful gift of life on planet Earth.
And to do that in terms of locking in our GPS coordinates to our true north, whatever that is for us, we have in a book an exercise called developing our Yoda code. And that's 5 or 6 words that describe who we want to be at the very end and how we want to be remembered and thought of by those who knew us the best and loved us the most. And so mine, for instance, are kindness, generosity, gratitude, courage, integrity, and humility. And I try to operate by that, by that code in my decisions. And it really does help it takes the complexity out of some of the decisions, just having that as the end in mind, the end game in mind. But back to, so the Yoda code is something I love, and I have it posted sticky note in the kitchen, which is, I think the room of, particularly with children, most activity and emotion. But I have it posted in sticky notes in a couple of different places just to remind me, because the more we see cues, the more that we remember and embed as habit. But back to what you were saying also about parenting and the things that we want to upload and the things we want to kind of downregulate in ourselves that we may have, carried on from a previous generation, from our family. I'll just give you a personal example. I grew up in a household where my, emotions were not part of the, part of the drill at all. It was and so the being seen, noticed, empathized with, that was really not part of the household culture that I grew up in, the emotional culture. So I have developed as a human being kind of in opposition to that. Because of that, I've developed as having these very sensitive antennae for emotions, and I study emotions. I'm fascinated by emotions. I deep dive into that, and I can overcorrect with the boys sometimes. Like I'm seeing things before they're seeing them, and I want to help them understand what's going on inside of themselves. And while that can be a skill, that can be an asset, there are also times when I've just learned I need to back off and just like let them be. Like just don't notice, but be quiet. And that's been my personal work as a mom, and let things kind of play out as they will and be patient. And then, at the right time, go in and talk about it when a moment presents itself, to do it more organically. But, force feeding them an understanding of what's going on, or all the details, all the different dynamics and levels of, what a situation might be in their lives, isn't really helpful. And that's required awareness and, and understanding that it's happening in the first place. And also, one thing that has been very, very helpful is just talking to them about it, just saying, listen, I do this because I love you so much. And this is something that I really wanted in my own childhood. And so this is this massive gift that I want to give to you, because I just want you to have the best lives possible and be the very best versions of yourselves. And that's helpful, because anything I think that can, that transpires to make us as parents human, where we can kind of, where we're just human, we're flawed, we're vulnerable, and we can connect at that level of, soul to soul and human to human, heart to heart. It just enhances relationships, and I think it reinforces this feeling that it is a journey, and that we're all kind of growing together, in our own ways.
I love that. And I think it's interesting, because I always tell myself that the story's still going on. So how we build these stories in our brain. I think back to as a kid, as a teenager, everything is against you. Like you're really, I know from a young man, you're separating in some way so that you're safe enough to go out on your own. There's this independence. And so you kind of start to block that inner core voice. I know you have a special word for it, but getting to that core inside voice, and it's harder to get in from parents or the right message, but your friend could say the same thing and they are listening, right? So the example is, like last night, my son has a small little tweak in his quad, and I went into his room and I said, hey, I want you to use the sauna and the cold plunge tonight. That these tools are there to help you. If you're not feeling 100%, it's okay, but use the tools to get better. And he didn't want to do it. I said, please do it for me. Right. And of course it was, he didn't want to do it, but he did it anyway. Right. So now he's in that phase where he's listening just to appease me, not because he actually believes it's a good thing. On the way to this interview this morning, I left him a voice message, and it was exactly what you just said. And it was, hey, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I don't know everything. I know that I probably know the least about what's going on. You might be 100% and I might be overreacting, but here's where it comes from. It comes from a place of love. Your coach, your dad, your mom, everything we're saying comes from loving you. So if that's our biggest challenge, just know that we're imperfect. We're not saying we know everything. We're just saying we love you. That's all we're saying. And I usually get a thumbs up or an okay. And that's about all I got that this morning. But it's how I communicate with someone that's similar to me, because I know I would have shut down. And so I love how you brought that around, and being personal and acknowledging what we're doing is so empowering, and knowing that we have our own things we're dealing with. Right. And then Dr. Jim, you mentioned something, that the tombstone, which was one of the most powerful parts I thought of the book. There are 7 things that you're really identifying the kind of person you want to be, but you also want to be remembered by. And I've had the honor of doing 4 eulogies for all 4 of my grandparents. And I say honor because they were all different, but there was a common theme in every one of them. It was the
Mhm.
kind of person they were. It wasn't what they accomplished. It wasn't what they wrote. It wasn't anything more than who they were as a friend, as a parent, you know, at their best, not at their worst, at their best. And I was so honored to be able to do that. And what you do is you shape with wise decisions, you're shaping that tombstone, that eulogy virtue of how we live our lives today so that we can be better when we're remembered one day, and life will be cut short for you. Whatever it happens, it may be tomorrow, it may be in the end, but it's so powerful. There's so many great things in this book, but I just wanted to add those 2 points because I thought it was awesome.
You know, it's interesting. I used to do this with large classes, you know, 20 or 30 people. And then I would collect them and read out loud all the things that people put on, they wanted to have on their tombstone. And it was so shocking to everyone. We did it over and over and over again through the years, multiple years. And it was so shocking, they thought that everyone copied from everyone else. Because we are social creatures. And what most of the most important elements that are carved into that tombstone were connections to other people, loving, kind, grateful, inspirational, positive, on and on. And very noticeably absent were things like, I won 2 Olympic gold medals. I became a millionaire at the age of 30, or I will become a millionaire at the age of 30, whatever it is. All of these extrinsic markers of success were just not on the tombstone. And yet, when we looked at how much energy people were putting into kindness and compassion and integrity versus getting to the top of the mountain and being the champion, it was like they were very embarrassed because they are driven for the extrinsic, but the actual scorecard that matters, and I call it the hidden scorecard, the one that actually gives us the sense that we lived the life we should have lived and that we're happy with that life, doesn't come from extrinsic now. So we're all born to chase. There's no question about that. But I want to know who you are becoming as a consequence of the chase. And are you getting closer to being home in who you're becoming as a consequence of chasing? And then, you know, something else you said really struck me, that one of the things in the book that's really quite important is understanding the gatekeeper. Our Yoda is either a great gatekeeper or really lousy. A lot of folks end up listening to people they should never listen to. Once it gets through this, into the inner chamber, into this command center, it can create chaos. And so you have to have a filtering system. And you're trying to get through to your son. And you know, as they get older, they start blocking out more and more of adult, you know, messaging. And they tend to listen to their peers. And their peers may be very, very dysfunctional in terms of the messages they're sending. Let's try drugs. Let's go fast here, drinking and driving, and on, that could have catastrophic consequences. So part of parenting is equipping them with an understanding that they get to decide who gets in the inner command center and who doesn't. And you better let the people, here's how you decide who should get in and who doesn't. Those people who genuinely care about you as a human being, those are the ones you want to get in. So when you say to your son, I did this, or Sheila says to her boys, I'm only doing this because I care about you, I love you. I'm not perfect, but it's really, it's the best I got. So I hope you hear me, at least hear this, hear that I care about you and I love you. That will get through to the command center, and that will begin to have an impact. But they need to be better and better discriminators about who has access and who does not. And once you have access, it can create chaos for a very long time.
And as they should be, right? Because the other thing I think it's hard for parents to understand is we may not always have the best advice for our children and the direction they want to go. And they have a clearer idea of what they're trying to accomplish. We have the version of them we're trying to create to put out into the world to help them be the best version of themselves. Good humans, all the traits, Dr. Sheila, that you mentioned are things that I talked about in the eulogy and in all of them, right? And those are the things we want our kids to have at the end of the day. Doesn't matter what they are. It doesn't matter what they do. It matters kind of have they set that parameter of being that good human, one that they're proud of inside.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a village, and it's not just us. It's not, we got to think we're going to take some of the pressure off of ourselves as parents. Yes, we're the front line. We're their earliest and longest, but there are other people and in our children's lives. And for my boys, I would say they're sports coaches. They are powerful figures in their life, the grandparents as well. Particular parents of their close friends, just having reinforcements around who are reinforcing the same things over time. And sometimes I will reach out to a coach to message something that, when I want to help my, one of the children make a decision, to help them, because it's like, I know it's the right decision. I have no question it's the right decision. And the decision they want to make is not going to get them to where they want to go. But, not assuming the pressure of being the one who has to force it through. There are other ways to do it gently and kind of open up that energy lane where they can actually hear and let it into that command center and feel a sense of agency in doing it. Also, no one wants to be forced to make a judgment call when there's negative energy or friction. So when they can do it on their own and just feel like, it's a suggestion and offering a gift and it's being reinforced by a number of people that they trust and love and care about, it's a much better way to make it sticky over the long term, which is ultimately what we want as parents.
When my kids...
It's so interesting that we tend to think as parents that when that kids can't really go to the end of their life and determine what they would really like to become who they want to be, and encourage them to look forward in their life and to actually try to craft kind of this image of who they most want to be at the end of their life, how they want to be remembered, who do they respect the most, and what kind of human being do they want to be. And all of that architecture that is being built between their ears becomes part of this wisdom of Yoda. And you just don't want them to just tell them who they want to be. You want them to do the work. You want them to think about it and value the fact that they're trying to figure out this, and we're still trying to figure it out, what this world of crazy life is all about. But we're always trying to find, meaning and purpose. And more important than what happens to us is the story that we tell around what happens to us, and help them understand that. And what is the story you want to create about your life? And where are your values? What is the most important parts of you that you want to make sure that you grow and nourish as you grow older? And having them do that. Unfortunately, schools don't do that. We want to do that at the Youth Performance Institute. We want kids to start doing that even in the earliest years and start developing this internal narrative that's values-based and has a grounding in a really constructive private voice, a very, very powerful narrative that's going on, that your best coach is in your head, that you don't look for others. You're kind of keeping the bad stuff out and allowing the good stuff to come. And you've got a great, great source of wisdom built into the architecture of this brilliant neural processor between your ears. And that's really what Sheila and I are working toward on this board.
If I can add one thing to that as well, and it relates to helping children build up trust in their own ability to make decisions, and it takes a village theme. I'm just going to give you an example of our son Charlie, who's going off to Chapman to play football next year. Beginning of the season, in the fall, he got helmeted in his left knee. His patella was dislocated. It was a terrible injury, and put him out for the season. And he really, really, really wanted to come. He loves football. He loves to work out. He was captain, great kid. And it was a horrible injury for his senior year. Anyway, he wanted to come back and play the last game of the season, which was against a team that was one of the toughest teams in the state, aggressive, big guys. It was just an accident waiting to happen. And he had an opportunity to go play in a bowl game in December at Dallas AT&T Stadium. So I was like, Charlie, you can't play in that. You're like, don't play in that last game. He just wanted to finish up with his team, finish up strong. And so for a while, I was coming in with just trying to explain to him why that was a terrible decision. And I did invoke his coaches in, and his one particular coach in to talk to him about it. But ultimately what I wound up doing is writing him a letter and leaving it on his pillow saying, listen, you're going to make the right decision. I know you will. And we learn from making our decisions. We usually learn more from the bad decisions than making the good decisions. And it's up to you. And I trust you to make the right call. And I know you'll learn either way. And I know you'll do the right thing. And that was a really big moment for both of us. For me, for just letting go and just saying, listen, I trust you. Go with it. I'm looking out for the best, but I recognize that you're the one who is in the hot seat here, and you'll make the right call and you'll learn either way. And it was this beautiful moment for us in our relationship, because it had me letting go, because I want to hold on. I want to help. I want to make sure everything's okay. And it had him feeling a sense of, oh, okay, I got the ball. And then he thought about it in a different way because of that. And he decided not to play in the game ultimately. And he went and played in the bowl game, and it was a wonderful experience for him. But it worked out not because of pushing, but because of kind of intrinsic pulling. The water flowed where it was supposed to flow in the right way. And everything played out in this beautiful way. There was a learning experience for both of us.
You really do get to see them make the decisions that you've been teaching for all those years. And we usually see it and hear it from other friends or family members where they're out, and then you get a story of how they did something, and you're like, wow, they are listening. They're doing everything that we knew they have in them, but they're not always able to show it in the house because it's that safe zone.
Yeah.
And I like that in the book as well, because you guys talk about the family, you talk about politics, you talk about using your Yoda to be better in the toughest situations where you're really as free as you'll ever be. When you're sitting at the dinner table at Sunday night dinner with your mom and your dad and your siblings, and you're just the rawest version of yourself.
Yeah.
And so Yoda becomes a little harder to implement in those times. And sometimes if you're really focused on it, you're executing. And your children, what you're teaching them is to trust their own decision, to use yourself as a guide. I can read your book and I can choose what to use out of this that's going to make my life better. I don't follow every aspect of every book I read, or I'd never, ever have a functioning brain power for myself in any capacity. But I do take in all that advice and then make decisions on it. And one other little side for our parents out there, when my kids went on social media, the very first thing I did was go on Instagram or whatever it was, and I followed all the people's voices I wanted in their head. And I did not, and I went back on, and if they were unfollowed, I refollowed them again. I did that for probably the first 90 to 120 days of them on social media. So I was building the algorithm of success and happiness and positivity and mindset training, and the things that were not going to lead them into anxiousness and distrust and anxiety of all different kinds. And I think that's what I love about what you're doing right now, is you're not just trying to raise great athletes, both of you. I mean, Dr. Jim, you've trained. As a podcaster, I fall in love with my guests in a different way every time, right? And it's usually during the research. So I got to read the book. I got to listen to Tim Ferriss's interview that you did, and you told a story about Dan Jansen and how he overcame. I remember this story. I remember watching it as somebody that was watching it, but hearing your version of it and how you helped change the mindset And I'll let you tell a little bit of it because I know we don't have a ton of time, but a little bit of that. And I'll say, Dr. Sheila, for you, it was sharing the story of your son Wyatt and how his brother got injured and he came back in and he was really putting too much pressure on himself. And you were using the analogy of how sports and life and school, how they're all correlated, but the entire human is what you're raising, not just that small part. We can get lost as parents in the one moment of football or the one moment of soccer, and so that's I'll lay that up. And if there's if Dr. Jim, you want to tell a brief story of that and how mindset shift can really make a difference, I feel like that would be a good for the listeners. And I don't want to give them too much because I want them to go listen to I want them to listen to you on Tim Ferriss, just like the Mastery podcast should be listened to for Dr. Sheila, because these are amazing, and sharing the information is a great way for you to continue to learn and build your brain.
So, yeah, a couple of things. One of the things that Sheila was just doing and you were just doing is you were literally taking decisions and using it as kind of a living laboratory for understanding how decisions are made. So it's like taking, as opposed to most parents think about decision making, they don't even know how it's happening. They just hope their kids, they don't even teach decision making because they're not sure what the process is. Every single time a child makes a decision, even if it's a temper tantrum, help them understand this is a choice they're making, and blow it up and say, we're not going to be able to we can't go in and disrupt all these people with a temper tantrum in the restaurant. That means we're going to be outside. But you can make the choice if you want to, I know you're angry. I don't even know what it is. If you want to help me understand, and we go back in, but you can't be that. But the decision is we won't get to eat with everybody else. And so you begin to build some architecture around decision-making at the earliest ages and really put, as Sheila and I did, the whole decision-making process under a microscope. Who do you want to be here? What's the most important part of you from your perspective before you make this decision? So I really want to encourage every single decision we make thousands and thousands of them. Let's just pick some of them and really go to town and teach what decision making is all about and how their Yoda can be educated to make better and better choices. And they will one day trust Yoda to get them home. So the Dan Jansen story was, I think it's one of the greatest stories in sports history because he was under so much duress. He had failed so many times. The press really they wouldn't let him forget about the death of his sister. To go into all of that would take too much time. But I will tell you this, he did what no one believed he could. And I had him on it. We had a training log system that every single day he actually monitored 23 variables every single day, and he kept a journal. And at the top of the training log, I had him write before Lillehammer, when everyone said he would fall and be the greatest choker in sports history and be the greatest Olympic 500-meter skater in history, never to have won any medal whatsoever. And that was on his shoulders. And I had him write 35.99, which was the 36-second barrier was like, Roger Bannister's 4-minute mile, that it will never be broken because it's too much. But I asked him what he most wanted. And I said, then for every training day, I want you thinking about breaking the 36-second barrier. And we're going to change, not that it's impossible, but you're going to be the first to break it. And we don't have a lot of time left. Let's just see what you can do. And every day he got into that. And then I had him write, I love the 1,000. He didn't love the 1,000. He did that for training. He hated it because he was always tired. It was for training purposes. And he said, I don't love the 1,000. I really dislike it. It's just like, I just do it for training. And I said, I want you have one event and it's unforgiving. I believe you could have greatness in more than one event. I want you to think about winning an Olympic gold medal and breaking an Olympic record in the event that you have never done anything. And in fact, 2 years earlier at Albertville, he came in 26th in the 1,000. So he did this, and before Lillehammer, he broke the 36-second barrier 4 times, once at 35.76, which is absolutely inconceivable at that time. And then he had a little slip in the 500, and we had 4 days. I was with him at Lillehammer, and we worked on getting himself prepared for the final day of his final event of his life as an Olympic athlete. And there were 7 people that had faster times, including Kevin Scott, who was the world record holder. And he not only won an Olympic record, he broke the Olympic record, all-time Olympic record in the 1,000. In the same event, he came in 26 2 years earlier, and an event that he never thought he would ever be anything. And he changed his mindset, and he changed his future, and his life changed.
Yeah, I love how you flipped the mindset to I love the 1,000, because a sprinter doesn't like endurance events. Like it's immediately embedded in them. It's almost like to love one thing, you can't love another. But that change is so valuable, because oh man, we're talking to some of the greatest thinkers in high performance in life out there today. And if you have a chance to dig into a little bit more of the research, to read the books, it's really, really valuable. How about some parting thoughts? Dr. Sheila, is there something that, we've talked about a lot of things today. What do you want our listeners to know? And what are some things that we can leave on thinking about? And I'll defer to Dr. Jim afterwards.
Thank you. I think the most important thing to know is that we are the authors of our own stories, and we can help our children author their stories, and they in turn pass that on to their children or grandchildren. It's this really multi-generational thing. And the science story is powerful of how nurture shapes nature across time. And it happens through the conduit of positive relationships, caring, and love, and being aware so that we can act rather than react, make the decisions that we want to make, recognize moments and recognize teachable moments in particular. That's really the best that we can do. And embracing the process, the imperfections of the process, and thinking about this as a big, giant off-road adventure, a learning journey where we can learn about ourselves. I think, my 3 boys are my most important teachers in powerful ways, because, those are the relationships I really want to get right. I go back into myself to learn about myself through the conduit of those relationships. And so really embracing the journey, and don't forget to have fun, and don't forget to laugh and have a sense of humor about things, because that can break things up in an instant. That helps us all come together and learn and become better people.
That's great. Any parting thoughts, Dr. Jim?
Yeah, I would say that the most sacred space we have as human beings is the space that allows us, and it's completely unique to our species. No other species in the animal kingdom has the ability to change directions, to make a decision, and to follow it. And that ability, that awareness, that what we call conscious reflection or reflective consciousness, is really our superhuman, it's our superpower. And we can choose to just not even reflect on it and just go through life pretty automatically. Or I'm hoping, and Sheila's hoping, that this book will get you to think about every decision you make is like maybe a living laboratory for you to get better for yourself and all the people who are watching you. As a leader, you're leading people in decision making. And I worked with so many corporate executives, and leadership is all about judgment, about making good decisions, about wisdom. And if we as parents are really committed to bringing their sons and daughters Yodas into this wisdom arena and help them understand the sacredness of this ability to make choices, no one will lose. And that we just want to equip them with the capacity to make wise decisions for the rest of their life and get home.
So the book is Wise Decisions. a science-based approach to making better choices. I highly encourage you to grab a copy, work through it yourself. Even if you are a master of decision making, there's always room for improvement. And where do they find each of you if they want to get more of your research, your data, and your beautiful insight?
You want me to start? I'll
Yeah,
just say,
you go ahead.
I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a lot of the things that I do, videos and everything else. And my website is Jim-Loehr, LOEHR, .com. And so they can reach me there. They can also reach me on LinkedIn.
And on my end, I'm also on LinkedIn. And then my website is SheilaOhlssonWalker.com. It's Sheila, SHEILA, OHLSSON, the original Swedish version, Walker, WALKER.com. And all of my research is there, as well as some of the videos and podcasts that Jim and I have done together on the book.
Well, I can't thank you both enough for being here today. It was an honor to be able to have this conversation with you. Our listeners, I know, gained a ton of information, and I highly encourage everybody to check them out, because not only have they done amazing things, they're doing amazing things, and their story continues. So please listen, learn, and continue to grow. And thank you for having me as a part of this conversation today. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.